Sego sewa guego. Thank you for joining us today to celebrate Indigenous Joy. My name is Rana Lapine. I'm Mohawk. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the fund manager for the New Songs Rising initiative at Grantmakers for Girls of Color. I'm honored to be joined today by brilliant participants, including staff and consultants from our partner organization, Seventh Generation Fund for Indigenous Peoples, New Songs Rising Initiative grantees, and Native and globally Indigenous young people. We'll conclude today with a video highlighting our youth, produced by Allie Young, founder of Protect the Sacred, a New Songs grantee. For a quick overview of our fund, New Songs was created in July 2021 in partnership with the Seventh Generation Fund for Indigenous Peoples, whose wonderful and incredible executive director, Tia Oros-Peters, serves on G4GC's advisory board. Since then, we've granted 62 grantees, a total of nearly 1.9 million to Native and globally Indigenous diasporas, with an additional amount of over 1 million forecasted to be granted in the second half of 2023. Current grant focus areas include, but are not limited to, access to culture, language, and tradition, political organizing and policy work, climate justice work, coming of age work, support for systems involved young people and their families, domestic violence support and prevention, and more. Over the last year, we've held a series of listening circles with Indigenous girls, femmes, and gender-expansive youth, as well as their relatives and our New Songs grantees. We'll be sharing detailed takeaways about those sessions soon, but today we want to respond to the request we heard to publicly celebrate and center the genius, joy, and vibrancy of Native and Indigenous girls. We also recently launched a New Songs Rising Fellowship, an 18-month fellowship for Native American and globally Indigenous girls, femmes, and gender-expansive youth, featuring skill building, mentorship, mental health support, participatory grant making, and more. Applications close August 4th, and the link is in this video description. I encourage you to share it widely. I'll now pass this over to Mima Salas, who will give us an overview of their work within 7th Gen's Thriving Women program.
Yeah, Rana. I'm so happy to be here. Yat e shik e Mima Salas Yinyashye, Nakadine Enishle, Lewis in La Jolla Bushishchin, Sitna Jenny Dashes Che, Do Nakai Dashanale. Hello, everyone. My name is Mima Salas. I'm the program associate for the Thriving Women program at 7th Generation Fund for Indigenous Peoples. I'm so happy to be here and share a little bit about what we do as an organization and some of the work that I get myself involved in under the Thriving Women program. So 7th Generation Fund strives to sustain lasting relationships with the grassroots projects that we support. Last year, we celebrated our 45th anniversary as an organization. And this last year, by focusing on sustaining those relationships, we organized 2 in-person gatherings. One was the Heart of Her Nation gathering that happened back in October of 2022, which brought over 200 Indigenous women from all around the world together in one place to come together in the spirit of kinship and healing and rest. Because I know that those who are on the front lines doing the work within the communities don't get all the time to rest. So we wanted to provide that space for the projects that we work with. And at that gathering, we also had the opportunity to highlight the work that Grantmakers for Girls of Color do within the community and show our gratitude for the partnership that we have established and hope to maintain moving forward. In this past May, we had the Keeping the Home Fires Burning gathering that has been going on for the past 20 years. It brought over 300 people from all around the world, Indigenous peoples, that centered peer learning and kinship, all following the theme of walking in the prayers of our ancestors, land, water, language, and life. And through this work that 7th Generation Fund has been doing, it was natural to create a program pathway for our Indigenous women. This program supports grassroots Indigenous women-led initiatives that work to prevent and remedy gender oppression, address missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit, uplift matrilineal health and wellness practices such as birth keeping and healing, and bolster coming of age ceremonies. And through this work, I'm so happy to work with Star Green Sky, who is our consultant that coordinates and facilitates the Eagle Feather Fellowship, which I will pass that on so she can introduce herself to you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mima. Bonjour, hello everybody. Gawin apache inita anishnabit mose anang green sky nindijnakas mikanak nindurum gaz agasquaj mikag nindunjabat San Diego ninda. So hello everybody, my name is Star Green Sky. I am Leech Lake Anishinaabe in Oglala Lakota. I am currently residing on the ancestral lands of the Kumeyaay people in what is now known as San Diego, California. And I'm currently working as a consultant with the 7th Generation Fund. I'm working to help develop their Eagle Feather Fellowship program, a Thriving Women Program initiative. And I'm so excited to be here and to continue this partnership with G4GC. The Eagle Feather Fellows are young women ages 18 to 24 who are really committed to participating in individual and collective learning opportunities so that they may grow and contribute to strengthen not only themselves and their families, but also their communities and tribal nations as a whole. It has really been my honor to witness their growth as the program has excelled not only in their knowledge and their skills and capacity for learning, but also in their own empowerment as future leaders and positive community members. The fellows have engaged in peer-centered conversations, both in person and in virtual settings, to really emphasize culture sharing, to build a sense of sisterhood and community among one another, and to also identify key priorities of young Native women in order to build healthier and safer futures. The dedication and commitment that these fellows have really demonstrated is not only admirable, but also deeply inspiring to see and witness, as they have imagined and even brought to life community projects with the purpose of bettering their ancestral lands and tribal nations for generations to come. I'm so excited again to be here and to be a part of this partnership, and I am excited to see where this goes in the future.
Thank you, Star. We will now transition to a quick break, returning in 5 minutes to hear from our grantee panel as they discuss centering Indigenous representation and data. See you soon. Sego sewa guego. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our first panel of the day. Again, my name is Rana Lapine, and I'm honored to serve as a moderator for this conversation. Native American and Indigenous communities are notoriously underrepresented in data. Our people and our inherent sovereignty are often discluded, mislabeled, and intentionally dismissed or erased in data collection and analysis, and many research practices actively enact violence against our people. There's often a fundamental misunderstanding that data and research are somehow anti-Indigenous or by definition harmful to our people. This doesn't have to be the case. Many Native and Indigenous scholars, academics, researchers, tribal nations, nonprofits, and more are actively working to re-indigenize the way we think about and show up in data and research. We will now hear from 4 New Songs Rising Initiative grantee organizations on their own data practices and how they have recentered their communities, identities, and needs within their approaches. Before we begin, I would like to warn viewers that our panel will include the topic of murdered and missing Indigenous women, girls, and relatives, and other forms of gender-based violence. Please do whatever you need to care for yourself while listening to this conversation. I'd like to ask all of our panelists to introduce yourselves. Please tell us your name, your pronouns, who your people are, a quick 1 to 2 sentence overview of your organization, and a quick summary of research that you've worked on that you're proud of. Nicole, if we could start with you.
Yes, thank you. Bonjour, Nintanoe Maganang, Nicole Matthews Jaganashimang, Manidu Beneshi Indigo, Migazian Dodame, Gawa Baba Ganakag and Dunjaba, Greetings, relatives. My English name is Nicole Matthews, and my Indian name is Spirit Bird Woman. I am Eagle Clan, and I'm from the White Earth Band of Ojibwe. I'm the executive director of the Minnesota Indian Women Sexual Assault Coalition. My pronouns are she and her. Our organization is a statewide tribal coalition and a national tribal technical assistance project focusing specifically on addressing sexual violence and sex trafficking, including the intersections with our missing and murdered Indigenous relatives. And we work with communities across the country, tribal and urban Indian programs as well. And one of the pieces of research that I think I am most proud of is our work that we published in a report called The Garden of Truth, the prostitution and trafficking of Native women in Minnesota, and where we interviewed 105 of our Native sisters who were used in prostitution and trafficking, and published a report detailing their experiences and stories. And I'm happy to be here with you all today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Blythe George. I'm a member of the Yurok tribe, and I'm currently an assistant professor of sociology at UC Merced. My pronouns are she and her, and I work significantly on how to walk with our system's impacted relatives, whether this is through the criminal justice system or increasingly through missing and murdered, whether it is the epidemic when it comes to the data kind of gaps that are contributing to our understanding of the epidemic at large, but also the risk factors that are contributing to our sisters, our aunties, our loved ones more generally being taken too soon. And I have worked significantly with my tribal court as part of our justice system apparatus to kind of bring our way of thinking about the world and our worldview to not only how we try to intervene through policy, but also how we're trying to evaluate and capture the performance of our interventions at the tribal court level, as well as to fill this gap when it comes to understanding things like missing and murdered, as well as the disproportionate representation of tribal people in the jails and prisons across the country. I'm very excited to have the chance to speak today, and very grateful to the Yurok tribe for supporting this work.
Matyosh, Kachrana, Hunrutzilla Watch, Konogel, Sakrik, Shek Chikonogel, Ishkowaral, Tantish se, Kailer, Habisteash, Okjurasa, Saba Tantis de Kail. Bien, Ernesto, Estokbal a Bie Pate tu Castañol. Muy buenos días, muy buenas tardes, Rana, muchas gracias por la invitación. Me voy a presentar, mi nombre es Ernesto Ajanel, soy maya quiché, también soy maya ixil, hablo ambos idiomas, también español. Mis pronombres son él, him, he, y actualmente vivo en Ohio y soy el coordinador de los derechos lingüísticos de la Liga en la Liga Maya Internacional. Sí, y también el trabajo que hace Liga Maya es un trabajo muy amplio donde estamos enfocados básicamente a la comunidad maya, la comunidad maya de Guatemala. Estamos enfocados en apoyarles, brindarles acompañamiento e interpretación. Trabajamos con ya en el programa de donde soy o el programa que coordino, ya trabajamos con intérpretes a nivel nacional, a nivel de Estados Unidos, para brindar estos servicios. Nuestro trabajo, el rol de Liga Maya entre estas coordinaciones es servir como una puente de conexiones. La organización, otras instituciones, entidades, se conectan con nosotros para solicitando una o un intérprete. Entonces nosotros captamos esos datos, les brindamos el intérprete. Obviamente necesitamos como obtener información, retroalimentación de la persona quien solicite él o la intérprete, necesitamos datos bases para poder proveer al intérprete adecuado, como el origen de la persona, de dónde es, qué pueblo es, el municipio, el departamento, porque nosotros hemos identificado las variantes de cada idioma, las variantes que existen en cada pueblo. Entonces, como liga, nos aseguramos, nuestro enfoque principal es brindar una interpretación eficaz. Captamos datos ya de géneros, tal vez lo explique un poquito más de fondo en el futuro, al ratito. Captamos datos de géneros para nosotros poder proveer al intérprete adecuado y que él o la clienta no se sienta incómodo. Entonces, esto es lo que puedo compartir por ahora, de acuerdo a la pregunta. Muchas gracias.
Oki Nexuquax Nestuna Daniku Sutaki Sakobach Gomi. Hello, my friends. My name is Suta Calling Last in English. More properly translated into English is Rain Woman, Last One Standing on the Battlefield, Making the War Cry. And that was shortened to Suta Calling Last. I'm Blackfeet in blood, and that's a Blackfoot Confederacy, two Blackfoot Confederacy nations separated by the US and Canadian border. The founder and executive director of Indigenous Vision. And we do a lot of fun projects that are social and environmental justice related. A lot of them are mapping, consulting, and contracted projects for private maps that tribes and organizations need to help tell their story. And then we do public maps to help visualize the data, because as a scientist, I'm trained as a hydrologist and have a master's in management. And I understand that our communities don't know how to read spreadsheet data. And so I went out on the journey to visualize this data in story mapping. And it's been a really fun job so far. The project that I'm most proud of is our project currently being implemented right now. And that's taking our environmental justice data layer maps and combining them in a cumulative visual interactive map and looking at where animals and medicinal plants could be more susceptible to contracting chronic wasting disease or transmitting and being viable transmitters for the disease. The project is funded by the EPA. It was formerly in the environmental justice grants. They've moved me over to the small rural grants and emerging contaminants area. And that was because some of the contaminants I picked out were not regulated or defined as a contaminant. And this is the first time that the EPA will have traditional ecological knowledge in a quality assessment project plan. Thank you for having me here. And thank you to my tribe and my nations across the border for supporting me the way they have.
Thank you all for that wonderful introduction. I'm so thrilled to be hearing from you. Our first question will draw from the book Decolonizing Methodologies by Linda Tuhiwai Smith. In that book, she discusses the idea of walking away from colonial aspects of research in order to make space for our traditions to flow back in. Can you give an example of a time that you've shifted Western research structures to better serve your community?
Sure, I can start. I think going back to our Garden of Truth research, when we started this project, we came to it not as researchers. Like I don't come to this world as a researcher. I come to it as an advocate and wanting change for our communities and wanting our women and our relatives to be safe. And we also know that sometimes in order to tell the story, we have to have the research, right? We have to have the numbers. And so, we really did a lot to really think about what was the research that we wanted to do. How did we want to tell the story? And to begin with, we started with going to our elders and asking for the project for protection during the project, because we know that when we start talking about trafficking, there's there's people behind that, that topic, that issue of trafficking, that don't want you to tell these stories. So we asked for protection at the very outset of it. And then we went to our tribal leaders to ask for their permission, because we also want to make sure that we're telling the story in a way that's respectful and flows back to our tribal nations in a reciprocal manner. Because so often we have research that is extractive, right? It is taking from our people, from our tribes, from our communities, but it doesn't necessarily give back in the form of resources, in the form of storytelling, in the form, of things that would help our communities. And so we really wanted to make sure that this project from the very beginning honored that reciprocity that's really important for our tribal communities and lifts up our Indigenous values, that it centered the voices of our survivors. And I think that really, that along with prayer and protection and really helped to center the work of the research, and I think really helped to make it as successful as it was.
I can only agree so much with the previous point. I think pushing back on the history of extraction and exploitation is often kind of a fundamental first order concern, that we have to always be really cautious to make sure we're not just stepping in and repeating the same patterns that although the empirical method is not exclusively Western, and that's a point that Professor Tuhuai Smith, I want to say, I think she's professor, she makes that repeatedly, that we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater, that as Indigenous peoples, we've always had ways of knowing, we always had ways of collecting data. And so in many ways, trying to find our way back to those is really the task at hand, rather than trying to shoehorn a certain method into perhaps a context where it's not the most useful. An example I would offer is that in many cases, we are kind of operating within a deficit mindset, right? If we are counting how many people are going to prison, how many people are addicted to substances, how many people are going missing and murdered, although these are highly valuable data points that we must continue to collect, we also have to think of other important data points that capture how we're living. When we think of resilience and survivance, and how do we ask those questions that are just as important, if not more so, that are building on a strengths-based model, and at the same time honoring the fact that we are still here despite settler colonialism's attacks to the contrary. And so reclaiming these tools, pushing back against their history, but also realizing that there's a certain level of creative kind of autonomy that we need to embrace as Indigenous peoples to really craft the methods and questions that are most resonant for us and the futures that we're trying to build, right, with this Indigenous data sovereignty effort.
Martiosh, muchas gracias. Bueno, como expliqué en el principio, la Liga Maya ha navegado e investigado estos espacios, diversos espacios a nivel nacional e internacional, no con el fin de crear documentos o reportes, sino para cambiar los sistemas racistas e injustas donde viven en nuestra comunidad día a día. Y nosotros lo hacemos con el fin de hacer valer nuestros derechos, los derechos de la comunidad, nuestros derechos, que, bueno, más que todo en el exilio. Recolectamos datos para el beneficio de nuestra comunidad. Bueno, nos dimos cuenta que DHS, Homeland Security, también está cambiando procesos, partes de sus procesos, sus estructuras para poder brindar un mejor servicio a la comunidad indígena, ya hablando mundialmente. Pero en este plan hay muchas limitaciones de participación de nuestras comunidades. Y también desconocemos si es que ejercerán este plan o solo dibujan la panorama y al final no hacen nada, pero esperemos que realmente se concluya en algo. Nuestro programa de derechos lingüísticos, las agencias, nos hemos conectado con agencias, diferentes organizaciones y hasta inclusive el propio gobierno ha brindado, también ellos han brindado servicios de interpretación y reclutan a cualquier intérprete sin saber la diversidad, las variantes que existen en el pueblo o en cada pueblo. Y nuestros logros como liga han sido educar sobre la diversidad de los pueblos mayas y las variantes de sus idiomas. Hemos ejercido este proceso en nuestro plan, lo llamamos la comparación de idiomas. Este proceso ya forma parte de nuestro plan y nuestros procesos con el fin de poder brindar un servicio de interpretación eficaz y favorable, no solo para el intérprete, sino también para la persona quien lo necesite para que ninguno de ambos espacios salga perjudicado. También, como mencioné, hemos captado datos de rango de edades y de géneros de cada persona para también poder evitar esa incomodidad entre la comunidad y poder para que se puedan expresar. Sabemos, diversos, son diversos espacios en lo que presentan, en lo que, por decirlo, lo que enfrentan. Entonces, para hacerlos sentir cómodos, si es una niña, es un niño, pedimos quién prefieren, qué intérprete prefieren, hombre o mujer. Entonces, esos son los logros que hemos tenido. Muchas gracias por la pregunta.
I echo those sentiments. I think that there's a lot that can be said in terms of Indigenous methodologies and protocols when starting a project. And I think that these methodologies can be used throughout a project, before, during, and after, and continuing, because I think, one of the things that is missed most often is that, yes, I think it goes back to that famous statement that consultation is not consent, right? And so similarly, a visit with somebody is not their explicit consent as well. And so I think a lot of times when researchers, especially from the outside, come into our communities and they're extracting this information, I don't know if they often remember that that community will remain as is, or maybe worse off, and they'll go on to extract that information and get a PhD or a master's or something, to excel them in their life. And so there's this exchange, and it needs to be, in Indigenous methodologies, these exchanges would be mutually beneficial. And those are seen in like all of the origin stories and creation stories of we watched this animal, we observed this animal, and it taught us how to live. And so us learning those methodologies of maybe say the Deer Nation learning how to live, then we as people reciprocate those benefits, and we find out what that deer likes, and we make sure that it has plenty of it and easy access to it. So those mutually beneficial relationships and methodologies that are not often talked about, because it seems like Western academia is still at the point where they're like, where does traditional ecological knowledge fit in, and how do you quantify it? Because it's all qualitative data. And so I think it can fit throughout the whole project and wrapping it up. If you have ever been a researcher in a community, I implore you to go back to that community and check in on the people that you extracted information from, because those relationships, maybe shouldn't have ended if they did end, and did end.
Thank you all. Ernesto, our next question is for you. How does the erasure of Indigenous identities affect Mayan immigrants and refugees who arrive within the United States?
Ok, muchas gracias por la pregunta. Bueno, la desaparición de nuestras identidades como indígenas o pueblos originarios violan los derechos humanos, violan nuestros derechos a interpretación, nuestros derechos de implementar nuestras propias estrategias comunitarias y ancestrales de cómo hemos vivido, cómo nos expresamos. se han cortado, se han violentado completamente. Se nos imponen categorías, esto lo hemos visto siempre, se nos imponen categorías como latinos, hispanos, somos llamados latinos e hispanos, lo cual esto borra nuestra identidad y no solo borra nuestra identidad, sino que causa errores estructurales en los diversos sistemas. En el momento de que desde que nuestra identidad no sea reconocida, nos enfrentamos a la ola de barreras que vienen ya en el interior del país. Esta injusticia, como dije, no solo afecta una porción de nuestra vida, sino que afecta a nuestra vida entera. Lo vuelvo a recalcar, violenta nuestros derechos como seres humanos. Esto extingue por completo nuestra existencia. Somos privados de nuestros derechos, de derechos fundamentales, la libertad de cada pueblo, la libertad de cada persona, la libertad de expresarse desde sus idiomas, la libertad de expresarse ya externamente, por decir, su vestimenta. Ya se vive con ese miedo a ser juzgado, a ser visto mal, caminando en el parque, en pues lugares públicos con la vestimenta. Entonces, un ejemplo tenemos de todas las violaciones, tenemos también el derecho a la interpretación. Somos privados de este derecho, siendo uno de los derechos más fundamentales para nuestra vida y existencia. Sin tener esa libertad en expresarme, no me expreso mejor en el idioma español, me expreso mejor en mi idioma, desde mi idioma. Existe otra expresión más profunda desde mi idioma. Entonces, todas estas estructuras, todo lo que se ha creado sin incluir el pueblo indígena, ya hablando a nivel mundial, sin incluir a las diversas o los diversos pueblos indígenas, son creados para violentarnos si no estamos incluidos en esos procesos. Debemos estar incluidos en los procesos para que este proceso, para que esa estructura, para que el plan nos favorezca. Uno de los ejemplos, el racismo y la discriminación, ¿cuáles son sus afectos ya hablando actualmente? El racismo y la discriminación ha provocado que jóvenes y señoritas ya no les enseñen a sus hijos e hijas a hablar sus idiomas, usar su vestimenta y mantener viva su cultura. ¿Por qué? Porque han tenido esa experiencia de discriminación desde su país, el lugar donde emigraron, México, hasta llegar acá, venir a sufrir una vez más el mismo racismo de lo cual huían. Existe ese miedo, existe esas experiencias en decir, no, ya no le voy a enseñar a mi hijo a hablar su idioma, porque no quiero que sufra lo que yo sufrí, lo que he vivido. Entonces, sí, es lo que puedo responder. Muchas gracias.
Sutha, I have a question for you as well. You've embarked on an incredible journey to map missing and murdered Indigenous relatives and hate crimes against Native peoples. What would a fully realized map of these issues accomplish, and how would it look different than our current reality?
Well, I'd hate personally to see a fully realized map. That's a lot of sorrow in one picture. But what it's helping communities do is it's helping them find out their most dangerous neighborhoods. And it could help them make plans, safety plans for individual women and their women in the community overall, by letting them know which areas of town are the seediest, most dangerous, have a exorbitant amount of women going missing or have violence enacted towards them. And so there's a lot of planning and policy actions that can be taken from these maps in terms of preventing violence and safety, continuing safety.
Thank you. Nicole, you spoke earlier about your Garden of Truth report and some of the strategies you used in creating that. Can you talk a little more about the ways that traditional research methods and ideologies were included in that development?
Absolutely. I think, excuse me, we have the smoke from the fires in Canada coming down, so it's been a little bit difficult to breathe today. The air quality is not great. I think at the very core, like what we wanted to do was to really center the survivors, the women that spoke to us, right? And so, and also not wanting to have a cold, like, just a number on a file, right? And so one of the things we did, and the reason for the title Garden of Truth, is that we had a very lengthy list of flower names, and each of the women got to choose a flower name as their identifier in the research. And so, so when we talk about it, it is this this lovely garden that's also has stories of trauma and pain. And so that was, one of the very early decisions that we made, was to really look at how we humanized data and centered the survivors in that. As we met with them, we also made sure we had medicine available. So we had, we had cedar, and we had sage, and we had sweetgrass, and we had water and tobacco. We had ways for them to take care of themselves. We had food. We took as much or as little time as was needed, and we let them be in control of the process. And so if they chose to not answer a question, we moved on. If they wanted to give, a one sentence answer, and that was it, or yes or no, or whatever, we moved on. And so we really let them lead the entire questionnaires through the question process, and took time. And sometimes that meant we had interviews that were 3 hours long, because sometimes people just needed to pause, and that's okay. So we tried to do, we tried to really look at it as, how are we doing this relative to relative, and how are we, lifting up the stories of our sisters in ways that informs our communities and helps to build services and helps to create change, but is not in a way that lifts up trauma, in a way that can sometimes be voyeuristic and frankly not helpful, right? And so we really tried to be thoughtful about that. And then we also started our report talking about how we got here. We have to talk about colonization and the impact that colonization has had on our communities, and why we even have this issue with trafficking of our relatives right now. So those are some of the real tangible things that we did to try and really humanize this research and to approach it from an Indigenous lens.
Thank you. Dr. Blythe, you've done significant work to tie research and healing together, both at a community level and on an individual scale. What do you think non-Indigenous researchers are missing when they think about research as it impacts healing?
I think that in many cases, to a previous point made by my fellow panelists, the great majority of those who are coming from our communities and are working on research don't come to these issues as researchers. We are community members. We're tied to the issues often, through blood. I think the issue of missing and murdered is always particularly poignant on that topic, because it can feel so far removed for so many in the general, U.S. population, but in Indian country, on reservations, in urban Indian communities, very rarely is a person more than one or two people removed from an active case. And this is going back generations at this point, and so you have almost a real inability to appreciate not only the connections that are tying us to this work, but in turn how that that's set within kind of a context of historical trauma, and that we are conducting this research because it is vital to our health and well-being as tribal peoples, but on an individual and community level, it's also integral to our healing. Our tribal judge always says, people can't change their behaviors if they don't know why they're doing them. And you don't know what you don't know, but if we believe that people who know better will do better, there is a real effort to provide opportunities for healing that are drawn from what we're finding in our research in real time, while at the same time, similarly, not contributing to poverty porn, not trying to romanticize nor demonize any of our communities, but really reckon with what it means to essentially be addressing many overlapping, compounding inequalities, such that even those who are in the trenches, right, have family histories and ties to trauma, to mental health considerations, and that only underscores the need to think of, in my work at least, trying to not only theorize, but how would we implement a community trauma response? How do we ratchet up our efforts from, the individual being very, very important, but in many ways, there is a connection between the communal and the individual that a great majority of Western methods and treatments do not hold space for. And so we at Yurok Tribe, and the tribal court in particular, are often in a place to have to design these tools. But Judge Abby, she's a great teacher to me, and she's to many, and she always says that it's not our fault that we have these issues impacting our communities. We know that the invasion and settler colonialism is at fault, but nonetheless, we as tribes and as tribal people are in a place of responsibility to heal ourselves so that it stops for future generations, if we think within that 7th generation perspective. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and shift to our closing question now. And this will go for all of you. What might Indigenous joy look like in research and data?
I really love that question. I think, one of the things, when I think about what Indigenous joy can look like in research, I think about how are we lifting up the amazing and beautiful strengths that we have as Indigenous people? And, what does it look like to really tell our stories from our perspectives and in ways that really inform our communities to strengthen our communities, to prevent future harm from happening. And, one of the things that we learned through our Garden of Truth research, when we asked about, what do you need? What really helps you to heal? What has helped you to thrive, to be your best self? It always comes back to what our cultural values are. It always comes back to who we are as Indigenous people. And I think that, to me, even in research that can be really hard, that's was for me always how to connect to Indigenous joy, is to lift up those things that are inherently within us that we can look to for healing, for the strength of our communities, and for our future generations, is looking to who we are as Indigenous people.
Sí, muchas gracias. Bueno, al tener los datos de los pueblos originarios desplazados, los datos de la comunidad indígena, como dije, pues ya hablando a nivel mundial, teniendo estos datos ayuda a organizaciones, entidades que vayan defendiendo estos derechos a intervenir en diversos espacios, ya sea en la ONU, ante el gobierno, una vez más, DHS, o ante aliados, para visibilizar y educarlos sobre nuestra existencia, nuestra forma de vivir y cómo nosotros nos expresamos. Y también esto sería una alegría colectiva, usar nuestra vestimenta. Esto pues reforzaría en decir, pues yo soy tal persona, me siento orgulloso de lo que soy, voy a usar mi vestimenta, usar la vestimenta, hablar nuestros idiomas, que también forma parte fundamental de nuestro vivir día a día, y pues reunirnos ya libremente sin miedo a ser discriminados y vivir la alegría de ser reconocidos como miembros de un pueblo originario. Y como mencioné, cada uno viene huyendo de diversas situaciones. En el momento de ser reconocidos, nuestras identidades, ser recibidos de buena forma, y al no limitarnos en cosas bases para nuestro vivir, idioma, por ejemplo, idioma y vestimenta, al no ser limitados a usar estos recursos, renacemos de nuevo en un mundo diferente y nos expresamos ya libremente. Otra de las cosas, nosotros como pueblos originarios, como pueblos, hablando ya específicamente pueblos mayas, nosotros somos autores y relatores de nuestra propia historia y nuestros propios documentos. Lo que hemos estado luchando, hemos tratado la manera de capacitar jóvenes para crear artículos diseñados desde la comunidad, crear procesos desde la comunidad. No se pueden crear procesos fuera de la comunidad porque no se llega a una conclusión. Puede que funcione para mí, pero no sé si funcione para él o para ella, ya que es de otro pueblo. Entonces, esto sería una alegría demasiado grande y como dije, pues ya tendríamos la libertad en expresarnos internamente y externamente. Entonces, muchas gracias.
To kind of build on my previous point of trying to adopt a strengths-based model and to, there's a question I always think that, it was kind of posed in a community meeting format where elders and other community members had been kind of sitting and listening to a great long list of community outcomes. I think it's in Linda's book, if memory serves correct. And essentially the question is posed, you've told me, I say if it's not Linda's, it's Thomas Buckley's Standing Ground. Professors, they meld together the citations, but essentially it's the ethos of, you've told me why we're dying. Can you tell me why we're living? And that is a whole level of kind of reframing. And I think a big part of Indigenous data sovereignty is actually trying to find ways to bring joy and resilience to bear, that it's not just a, boring, dry Excel spreadsheet. It's not just the numbers that the feds want or whoever funder needs accountability and evaluation. It is a way to honor Indigenous knowledge systems and to bring into kind of this century our ways of knowing, while also building on the tools that we have access to by virtue of living in today rather than another time. And I know for me in my community, there's always a real level of kind of being cautious, but at the same time really pushing our young ones and our students to go out and kind of bring back those pieces that could be helpful for our community. I always kind of have this metaphor of bringing back a piece of the sky, so to speak, and how that's easier said than done. And I don't want to say that home isn't a place that is vibrant and deeply important as it is currently, but we also know there's things that are making us sick, and that we have a responsibility to heal within ourselves and within our communities. And by collecting data on our joy and not just our death and our struggles, I think that's you have to look for it, and we are arguably uniquely positioned to do so. I often think that there's always that myth of how quiet Natives are, and that you think of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, or that kind of quiet Indian trope. But if you really know our communities, if we're ever all together, it is very rarely quiet, and there's a level of joy that we bring to most things, Indian humor included. And so bringing that into the data, making it something that's alive and living, so that people realize that it's not just another kind of onerous responsibility that they don't want to do at the end of a long day of casework, but that it is actually data that's going to help them do their jobs better and more accurately describe the very important contributions and interventions they're making in the lives of our relatives and our family members at the village level.
Thank you, Rana, for this question. It's such a happy question to end on because it gives me enthusiasm and joy for continuing the work. Oftentimes in the justice work that I do, it's you have to do a lot of digging to find the silver lining, so to speak. And so I really enjoy this question, and it brings to mind my one of my nations and the Blackfoot Confederacy just had a historic day in traditional ecological knowledge, and the Blackfeet Nation of the Blackfoot Confederacy released the first wild roaming bison herd near Glacier National Park on our origin story mountain, Chief Mountain, Monastico. And this small herd of 24 individuals will roam between Waterton National Park and Glacier National Park and Chief Mountain, the Blackfeet Reservation. And it's going to be the first time that we had free bison in 150 years. And the tribal leaders started with, it is within our sovereign right to do this without question, because we know what we know. That part was unspoken, right? We know what we know, and we know that putting bison back on the land is going to rehab it in a way that us as human land managers can never do. And that assertion to the tribal sovereignty and us doing what is right, regardless of what politics or people's personal opinions may think of it, we know that this is the right thing to do. But it's just an amazing moment in tribal leaders not being scientists, but knowing what is right and acting on it. And now all of this beautiful Indigenous, probably a lot of Indigenous-led science projects, my own tribe's environmental projects, and a ton of other science projects are going to get to see what it's like to see wild, free roaming bison make their way about where they choose and eating what they would like. And I'm a big advocate for returning these agricultural lands to prairies. We've destroyed 98% of our prairies, and we're left with 2%. And disease is taking over our wildlife. And some managers are speaking of extinction models for pretty large keystone species. And this is in the 50, 60 year era realm. And so I think once these animals have the right that they should to roam and eat as they would like, I think we're going to start to see health return, not only for our herds of animals, because they have access to that biodiversity and their own medicinal cabinet, essentially, because they know what plant to eat when they're sick. It's just going to do so much. It's just, I hope the world can celebrate with us in this big win. And I think Indigenous joy also looks like the freedom to choose appropriate methods, like my nations have done, the inclusion of traditional ecological knowledge elements while protecting ceremony to maintain our intellectual property rights without institutions owning them, rather the community benefiting from those property rights. What's a good one that's really well known? Is that aspirin? A penicillin, rubber? Which one should we choose? Like, which major Indigenous contribution to Western world can we point to? And we still have struggling, starving Native children, and we shouldn't. So the protection of intellectual property rights from institutions and colleges and organizations. Joy, I think it looks like healthy elders and children. Indigenous joy would mean that our elders are feeling well enough to attend the ceremonies. Indigenous joy means that our children are being brought to ceremonies by healthy parents. And those ceremonies continuing create the environment that I think prevents MMIWs just due to lower violence, and also asserts our ability to maintain our traditional ecological knowledge, because that TEK is a proprietary element of our TEK, and it's only found in ceremony where you have to have the rights transferred to you. So it's not something that can be owned by anybody else except for the person it was transferred to, at least within my nation. But I think Indigenous joy looks like using what we know without having to defend it.
Nyawagoa, thank you so much. Your answers, especially to that last part, really filled me with a lot of hope and a lot of excitement, not only for what's currently happening, which is huge and important and inspiring, and also what's to come and what this work is being done in order to enact and enforce and, really, really tell the story of our people and our communities in a way that we deserve as Native people. I cannot thank you enough for your time today. You all do such brilliant work. I would like to encourage anyone who's watching this panel to please check out each individual organization, which we will link when this airs. Thank you again for your time. You are all such brilliant people doing such amazing work, and I feel very fortunate to have spent the last 45 minutes with you. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And to anyone watching this, come back in about 5 minutes and we will start our youth conversation. Nyawa, thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome back. I am about to introduce our wonderful moderator. This is going to be a discussion amongst Native and globally Indigenous youth. One of the biggest requests we got from our recent listening circles was just a desire to celebrate the brilliance and intelligence and joy and wonder of Indigenous girls, femmes, and gender-expansive youth. So that's what we're going to do today. With that, I will pass it over to our moderator, Lujane, who will steward our conversation and get things started.
Thank you so much, Rana. So great to be here, everyone. My name is Lujane. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm just going to introduce myself and then ask the panelists if they could also introduce us with their name, pronouns, who your people are, and an overview of what you're celebrating today. So a little bit about me. I'm Palestinian and reside in Oakland, Ohlone Territory in California. And while I've been in the Bay Area for the past 7 years, I was born in Michigan City, Indiana, grew up in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia for 7 years, and then spent most of my late childhood in Ventura in California until moving to Davis, California. Today I'm celebrating Eid al-Adha, which is one of the largest holidays in Islam. And unfortunately, my family is not able to celebrate in person today, but my family group chat has been blowing up. And I'm also celebrating my participation over the past few days at a climate resiliency convening in Humboldt, California, where many organizations ranging from tribal nations to environmental justice orgs across the state have been coming together to discuss and share their work in climate resiliency. And I just learned so much and met really amazing people doing amazing work, and heading back to Oakland today. So thank you so much for having me, and I'll go ahead and pass it off to our panelists to introduce themselves.
All right, I can start. Yat esh ke do shidene she ya zanaba arita jaminisha zanabethin shne nakai bashishin nasht eje tabaha dashinale ado as adene deshiche tosligai dat nasha akut ego astanishle. My name is Zanaba Jim, and I am enrolled in the Navajo Nation, but I am also from the Modoc tribe on my mother's side, and also Chicana on my father's side, and we identify with the Tarahumara, Aztec, and Mayan peoples. I am 26 years old, and I live in the small rural community of Toslagai on the Navajo Reservation.
Yak yagi wushkitan to sit akwan kis tla yochat duwasak. Hello, good afternoon. I am Mariah. My Tlingit name is Kis Tla, which means new mother. My Indigenous roots are of the Tlingit people in Southeast Alaska. My ancestors are from Hawk Bay near Juneau. I'm also Filipino, Japanese, and then have European mixture in there as well. I am 23 years old and I use any pronouns. And I am celebrating the potential birth of I say potential because I'm not like because they're inducing the labor today, so I'm gonna become we need like a gender neutral term for auntie, but I'm gonna become an auntie today, so super excited about that. Yeah, my sister-in-law is in the hospital right now, so I'm kind of just like eagerly checking my phone a bunch to to see updates. Yeah, thank you.
Hello, my name is Kaya Fernandez. I use she, her pronouns. I am an enrolled member in Lower Elliwak Clallam tribe. I am currently living in Bellingham, Washington, but I am from Seattle, Washington. I just recently graduated from Western Washington University with my degree in sociology. Today I am celebrating. I just got approved for a new apartment yesterday, so I'm super excited. I'm moving back to the Seattle area, so that's what I'm celebrating today.
That's so wonderful. So much good news today and celebrations. And I would just love to ask all of you, when do you feel most proud of yourself?
I think for me personally, when I feel most proud of myself is when I make an accomplishment, and whether that's an accomplishment that is made public and we get, if it gets acknowledged on social media, I feel proud of myself that the work I'm doing is being seen, but also the work that isn't being seen, that's behind the scenes, that's kind of, not really being acknowledged. I think I feel proud of myself in those moments too, that, for myself and internally, I'm making those accomplishments, giving back to my people, giving back to the land, giving back to our animal relatives. So that's what keeps me going is, the tiny accomplishments, but also the ones that get support from my people.
I feel most proud of myself when I can fix the small things. Just the smallest things can seem like the biggest problems. And when you realize that small things can be solved it can either be 5 minutes or an hour or a day, things take time. But like those small little things that feel like they could be detrimental and they can be fixed, I just really feel proud of myself. And you just have to remember that like problems can be small things and they can be fixed easily.
I feel most proud of myself. I think when I can be there for someone in my community, like hold like emotional space and like be inspiration for healing and like to like empower people to heal, whether that's just like through talking to them or I'm a filmmaker, so like witnessing their emotional reactions and just like hearing their feedback from like film projects or like inspiring youth to express themselves through like film, and knowing that like I was kind of like the inspiration for that, that's when I feel most proud. Yeah, just like dealing with emotions, I guess.
Thank you all so much for that. It's really great to hear, those moments. I think oftentimes it can be hard to, celebrate what we're proud of. And it's really great to hear that. And I'd love to just hear more about any projects that you're currently working on or any past projects that you're proud to have been a part of.
I had the opportunity to be an ambassador for a program here in Seattle, Washington called Native Action Network. Last year, I was one of their 2022 ambassadors, and what we would do as NAN ambassadors is we would go to different conferences in Indian country and represent Native Action Network. Native Action Network focuses on Native women leadership and representation. And it was amazing being able to represent that leadership and diversity for Indigenous leadership and Indigenous women.
Thank you, Kaya. And Mariah and Zoniba, do you have any projects that you'd like to share that you're working on, or any past projects that you've been a part of that you're proud of?
Yeah, there's one project I'm currently working on it. It's kind of been in the works for a while. I've been attending a few Native woman-led conferences and summits to become an entrepreneur, and that's something I've been interested in, is becoming a social entrepreneur, and I identify as an Indigenous woman. So that's something I've been really interested in for a long time. So finally, last week, I submitted my 501c3 nonprofit paperwork through the state of New Mexico for my animal rescue work. My whole life, we've been rescuing animals both on and off the Navajo reservation, mainly in the states of New Mexico and Arizona, since we're near that border. But I'm really excited. We did the articles of incorporation. I have my board of directors all confirmed, so we're just kind of waiting to hear back. And I'm new to business. I'm new to managing a nonprofit on that end. I do a lot of volunteer work for nonprofits, but managing it is going to be a learning journey for myself. And I'm really excited because, you know, we've helped hundreds of animals, and it's all been out of pocket all these years. So it'd really be nice if I could sustain myself and the more of the work and the volunteers we have in our location on the reservation.
Yeah, like I said, I'm a filmmaker. So earlier this year, I was able to put on a little film festival called film festival / media camp called Indigenizing Film. I went to the Santa Isabel Reservation. They're Ipai Kumeyaay. I'm residing on Kumeyaay land right now. And the camp was geared towards 8 to 12-year-olds, but the age range was actually 4 to 14. So it was super fun. And basically, it was just the 4-day media camp where we went and just kind of taught the very basics of filmmaking. And then we had a film festival at the end, where the community came together, and we had dinner, and it was super fun and just really rewarding to see everyone come together and celebrate the kids in that way, and just allow them to be able to creatively express themselves. I'm also have been working on a documentary project called Dear Alaska. I've started that production in 2020 for my senior project at UCSD, and it's gone through many stages. Just I think any film goes through a lot of stages, but that particular story highlights my reconnection journey, and then also kind of compares and contrasts Indigenous peers that I've met through UCSD and their journeys with reconnecting to their ancestors, and how we all combat colonialism, but celebrates our thrive-ins instead of just focuses on trauma. Yeah. And yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's so cool, Mariah. Is there a way we're able to watch your film? Is there a platform that it's on?
It's still in post-production right now, so I'm currently working on graphics, and I'm gonna do the score eventually. So hopefully that'll be out soon. But I do have a current project documentary that's available on YouTube. It's called California to Ghana, and I made that when I was studying abroad in Ghana. It's on YouTube. You can just look up. It says California to Ghana, and that's actually where I kind of had the inspiration for Dear Alaska, because I realized that I was studying abroad and then experiencing this beautiful culture that I didn't know much about my own. So I wanted to be able to share more about my own culture, but I couldn't. So when I came back, I was super ready to start another project like that. But yeah, thank you.
That's really awesome. I actually just saw yesterday Dr. Caitlin Reed, who teaches at Humboldt State University in Native American Studies, had showed a video that was made by the Kuruk and the Wiyot and Yurok tribes up in Humboldt County. And it was a really powerful video, and they actually have all of the Humboldt State University students watch this film when they first come to campus. So much of these stories and histories we do not learn in school, and it was really powerful. So thank you all so much for sharing. This is more of a personal question. Would love to just talk about what's your favorite thing about yourself, whether it's a quality or your personality.
My favorite thing about myself is that I am very much the person that is a caretaker, and I love taking care of other people. And I'm definitely the kind of person that puts other people before myself. And as much as that's not a great thing sometimes, but like it is one of my favorite things about myself, and I love taking care of people. I'm an older sister, an older cousin, and I'm also a caretaker. I'm a nanny for my job, and I work at an after-school care program. So just being able to care for all these people around me is like one of my favorite things, having the patience and the energy for it. It's really awesome.
I think for me, one of the favorite things about myself is I have many, many interests and many skills, and just the range of the things I do. People don't know how much I do, from Indigenous culinary arts to animal rescue to community organizing with various nonprofits. And I think just being versatile is really a cool thing. I can adapt easy to any situation I'm in, any group I'm working with or meeting for the first time. And again, just my interest too, just loving, the people in my circle, loving, Mother Nature, our animal relatives. Again, I think trying to be that voice for those that can't speak for themselves, just the advocacy and that extra care, that was said earlier. I think a lot of us just innately have that, and I really admire that for myself and for those that also have that as well.
Yeah, I think for me, my favorite thing is how adaptable I am. Like in any situation, I am able to, kind of just like adapt to that environment and really observe like what is happening around me first, and then be able to learn from that. So I'm like a fast learner. I can adapt to like any environment, and because a lot like this on my kind of reconnection journey, there's been a lot of situations where because I was raised in Southern California, I didn't know the context of things. But I've been able to learn just by like observing and like witnessing the like community interactions, and yeah, I feel like I love that I can just be able to adapt, because it's a really useful skill to, I guess, like be able to meet people where they are instead of like trying to like get them to adapt to you.
Yeah, definitely. I feel really similarly too with along with I'm the middle of 5 children, but also grew up all around. And I feel like that's really helped me in being able to adapt to various situations. And yeah, thank you all so much for sharing more about yourselves. And I'd love to ask a next question about if you have a story about a young person from your community that you'd like to celebrate today, whether it's a sibling or someone you work with. We'd just love to hear if you have a story to share.
I think for me, one of the youth I want to highlight today would probably be my baby sister, Atsaba. And she, at a young age, and I kind of see a resemblance with me. We get into a lot of work giving back to our communities at a young age, and that kind of separated us amongst our peers because we were active, going to our community events, cultural ceremonies, even the work with animal rescue. My sister has really stepped up. She's going to be a freshman this fall in high school, so it's hard to see her growing up so fast, and we want them to stay young. But yeah, she's really, she was valedictorian for her 8th grade class last month, and just a lot of the leadership work she's doing, I commend her. There's so many other things I think I see other youth doing across Indian country where they don't have that compassion for their people. They don't have that compassion for animals or the environment, unfortunately. So just want to give her a shout out, because maybe because she sees me as a role model, or just our family, we're known to be, activists and advocates for such topics that are important to us and valuable. I just commend her for picking that up at an early age.
Yeah, today I would like to celebrate my siblings because my sisters are 19 and 8 years old, and my brother, he's 3. So like just being able to watch them still grow up and like being able to discover who they are and what they want to do, because they're all still so young and like there's so much life ahead of them that like I could tell all these stories about them, but just like being able to watch them grow up and like really be able to, it's just being able to see where they go. Like that's really something to celebrate.
I also love my siblings, but I wanted to shout out particularly my cousin, and like she's older, also named Kaya. And I think when I think of resiliency, I think of her because I know she's gone through a lot, and like she's still so like vibrant and giving and caring no matter what. I'm getting emotional now because I'm like thinking of her and like I just love her and want her to be good. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, it's wonderful to hear about your siblings and family. And today I'm thinking about my baby sister, Alia. She just graduated from UC Santa Cruz a couple Fridays ago. And studied psychology, wants to become a nurse, and is really dedicated to helping people. And yeah, just really, really great to see her graduate and get through a really tough program. Yeah, thank you all for sharing. And I'd love to hear just, this work is very challenging. And just when you're feeling burnt out, whether it's your work or personal life, how do you take care of yourself?
Right, before continuing on, I also sorry, I wanted to like say that about my cousin. She's doing a project for MMIW, which I think is why I got emotional, just kind of like thinking about it. But she's doing like artwork and she wants to do this like 3D. She's an amazing artist, and so she's working on this like kind of like 3D like kind of light up project, and she's taking her own x-rays and like incorporating her own struggles like within the art in a really beautiful way. So I wanted to just like acknowledge her work in that way. But to answer the next question, when I get burnt out, I think I really turn to Indigenous like peers, but also the medicine like sage and cedar. Like I do like cedar steams and just like take a moment with myself and like just try to like kind of recuperate the energy. It's like especially when I'm feeling down, like burnt out or like overwhelmed by a society, it's nice to just like take those moments to sit with yourself and with your energy, and then also like with Indigenous friends who are probably going through the same thing. Like it's just really validating to like be able to like talk with them and share that energy with them.
Whenever I get burnt out, I feel like it's just best to turn to my family, because family will always be there for you. Like I said earlier, I'm living in Bellingham right now and my family's still in Seattle. And even though it's that hour-and-a-half drive, like it's like still kind of hard to get home sometimes, especially like when I work up here and like, my life is up here in Bellingham right now. But when I'm burnt out, like I just want to go back to Seattle for the weekend and just be with my family, and being able to be around my family and my siblings, just like it really helps me like calm down. Like last weekend I was like going through like some struggles like my anxiety, and my family was like, just come home, and we just had like a barbecue on Sunday, and like we were just listening to music and eating good food, and just being able to be with that support system, it's really helpful.
For me, I've noticed it's hard for me to stop pushing myself to the point of burnout, just because I do have so many passions and interests in different projects and groups that I'm working with. So it's been a challenge for myself, learning to learn where my boundaries are, learning to say no, learning to give myself, that time to recuperate and rest and get my energy back. So when I do get to the point of burnout, there's many techniques I've learned to help me, again, get my energy back, to heal myself, because a lot of the work that we do is to heal our people, heal our communities, heal our land, heal our animals, and that takes a lot from each individual person. So I think it's really crucial and important that I really love this question, that we do highlight, acknowledging that we do have a point of burnout and how to come back from that. There have been times where I've struggled to come back from burnout, and it has, negatively taken a toll on my health. So that's one thing. Another thing too is just to have a really great support system. I think when I'm surrounded by similar energy, similar minds, I just get that extra boost and that energy, and it feels really good. And then also, I think this is a cultural thing for our Navajo Diné people. It's more popular for young girls and women when we have our first menstrual cycle, our first moon. We have a 5-day coming of age ceremony called the Kinota. So I did that when I was in mid school, when I had my first cycle, and the whole time of that ceremony, we're supposed to be sacred and reverent, and we are pushed to the point of burnout the whole ceremony, but we can't stop what we're doing. We have to keep going. So I think learning to tap into that, whatever keeps you going, even if you're dead tired, even if your body is aching and sore. I don't know if it's a natural instinct, but that perseverance, we learned that at a young age. So I kind of channel that too when I do reach burnout, to keep going, even though I know it's not always the best for me.
Yeah, thank you, Zuniba, for sharing, and Kaya and Mariah. I think it's really important to talk about how, how we support ourselves and each other when we are experiencing burnout. Definitely like being able to say no to things, being with family, practicing our cultural, spiritual practices. So thank you all for sharing that. And just a couple more questions I wanted to ask. If you're able to, what does Indigenous joy mean to you?
I think for me, one sound I think of in particular, I would say helps me define Indigenous joy, is hearing our people laughing, whether it's at a family gathering, whether it's a Native comedian show, or if it's just your family and your friends and you're laughing together, because you're making inside jokes to the culture or the language that I couldn't really do that when I left the reservation to go to college, for undergrad in Colorado, because I didn't have the same people around that knew what those jokes meant or what Native Indigenous humor was. So I think of that sound of our people laughing when I think of Indigenous joy. And I also think of, again, we're taught that laughter is medicine. The work we do, they say it can be re-traumatizing. We're talking about, what 500, that has hundreds of years of, what's happened in this country in Turtle Island to our Indigenous peoples. And, even though now we're the minority, we make up 1 to 2% of the population. And knowing, what's happened with our history, with MMIW, with, gun violence, mass murders and massacres, just really terrible stuff in our history, we're still able to laugh in this present day. And I think that's just really healing, beautiful medicine. And I'm really thankful that we are able to do that as Indigenous peoples. And you hear that internationally too. I was able to study abroad in Aotearoa, New Zealand, And with our Maori relatives too, you know, they had to go through the same history, but same thing, they're still thriving, and their humor is, you know, like, you know, that's native humor. I don't know how to explain it, but that's what I think of if I were to define Indigenous joy.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I was gonna just say, like, yeah, that's a really great definition. My mind also went straight to just like being with community and like, yeah, being like around like aunties and just like having them talk and just like share food too. Like, I think a lot of like sharing like cultural foods, like being able to eat salmon and like herring eggs and like berries and stuff with family. I also like really brings in, like, it is what I think of when I think of Indigenous joy, and like knowing that we can still do that and still have that despite everything is really powerful. Just like sharing that space in that way. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think being with your community is definitely something that's very important. Also being able to learn traditions and being able to hold these traditions for future generations, I think it's very important to keep those traditions that are close to you and your family and your culture, and being able to share it with others is very important.
Yeah, thank you all so much. I definitely agree. And for me, I feel like food is a really important aspect of joy, Indigenous joy, and something that I feel, along with laughing and storytelling, just really brings us together. And then I just had one more question to ask you all. If you could tell folks, Indigenous or non-Indigenous, whether they're adults or youth, something about Indigenous youth, what would it be?
I feel like Indigenous youth have the power to do whatever their hearts and their minds like set out to do. And I mean, that's kind of like sounds like really broad, but I mean, you know, like when I think of Indigenous youth, I think of just like really powerful, creative people that are able to, you know, come together and make such, you know, healing, powerful movements that uphold tradition, but also, you know, like dive, you know, deeper and like are able to grow, like build upon it and you know, create like these Indigenous futurisms because of the immense creativity.
Yeah, I think it's important to highlight the resiliency and how strong Native youth are, and they're able to grow up and learn these traditions and being able to hold these traditions and keep passing them on to future generations, which is definitely very important, especially since some traditions can be lost if they're not passed on. So I think it's very important to highlight that.
One thing I would share about Indigenous youth is that, again, just given our ancestral roots, especially here in Turtle Island, we're the only ones in this younger generation that can say we do have roots that go back to this land, the specific land that we're on right now. And then that, you know, that just comes with so much, again, history, knowledge, traditions. And I think that makes, you know, Indigenous youth very unique. And that can be said for Indigenous cultures around the world to other land places and spaces. And, you know, going back to even our origin stories and our creation stories, you know, we have, you know, we can go and connect to those places, to our sacred sites, to our ancestral sites, and say, wow, however many generations ago, you know, my ancestors were here at this spot, and we get to go back and reconnect to those places, you know, as Indigenous youth. So I think, yeah, Indigenous youth are very strong, resilient, unique, and they have a lot of potential. And I think just a lot of the work that I do with Indigenous youth, even to this day, unfortunately, I think youth are a very underutilized tool. You know, youth have so much energy, so much creativity, imagination, you know, and I think they could really help if given and allowed those spaces to do that. But that's something even when I was younger, trying to go into these spaces and being told you're too young or you don't have enough experience, you know, this and that. But it's like, how are we ever going to get experience if we're not being allowed these opportunities to learn or to get trained for it? So that's a great question. And yeah, just a big shout out and kudos to our Indigenous youth around the world.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate all of your time and sharing your stories with me and just sharing more about yourselves. It's been so great to talk with you, and I'm going to pass it off to Rana to ask a few more questions.
Thank you so much, Lujane.
Thank you.
Nyawagoa, thank you so much to our amazing participants today, to our moderator, Lujane. Thank you all. I'm so, so grateful for your time, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. I'd like to thank you for your time today. Nyawa, thank you to our wonderful panelists, conversation participants, our colleagues from Seventh Generation Fund, and everyone who took the time to celebrate Indigenous youth in their lives today. I hope that you'll extend the same celebration of indigeneity, of the joy and brilliance, creativity, and wonder of Native and globally Indigenous girls, femmes, and gender-expansive youth. Nyawa.